Welcome everybody. My name is Brendan O'Malley. I am editor of University World News, the global higher education publication, which publishes news and commentary on its website and via weekly e-newsletters for its global and Africa editions. Now, while we are getting started, there is a quick poll underneath the chat just to help us get a feel for who is watching and listening today. And we know there are 2,200 people registered. So if you could fill that in, it would help us. Now, we hope you will enjoy this webinar on improving social impact and civic engagement, which is being hosted in partnership with Mastercard Foundation as part of our series on Transformative Leadership. And we are very grateful for Mastercard Foundation's support for that. In case you don't know, Mastercard Foundation has a strong interest in social impact because through its Scholars Program, it provides scholarships to thousands of students from disadvantaged or marginalized communities in Africa, mainly Africa, who are committed to giving back. Participating universities and education partners in the scheme provide Mastercard Foundation Scholars with classes on and support for transformative leadership, which can be explained simply as producing ethical young change leaders who seek to tackle injustice and the causes of poverty in their community. Now, before we get started, I just want to let you know that if at any time during the discussion you have any questions, please type them in the chat window. And if we have time, we will hopefully get to some of those towards the end of the session today. Also, to let you know that a recording of this webinar will be available within 2 days, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel. And for that, you just search for University World News on YouTube. Right, so let's begin. And today we are very pleased to welcome a panel of expert speakers with diverse knowledge and experience of the work that universities do in bringing positive change to communities around the world by tackling local and global challenges and in training students to become change leaders in their communities. So let me introduce you one by one. First of all, Hilligje van der Land. Good afternoon. Can't hear you, Hilligje, if you could turn your microphone on.
Good afternoon.
Glad to hear you. Hilligje is Secretary General of the International Association of Universities, IAU, based at UNESCO House in Paris. Now, IAU, the global voice for higher education, brings together universities from all around the world. And when it comes to its work to foster sustainable development, it partners with the Association of Commonwealth Universities and the Association of Francophone Universities at the United Nations, and is committed to making higher education a key driver of societal change, including via education and research for sustainable development. Next, we have Lorlene Hoyt. Good morning to you in Massachusetts, United States.
Good morning.
Nice to have you on board. Lorlene is Executive Director of Talloires Network of Engaged Universities, whose mission is to work with the heads of universities around the world to collaborate to confront societal challenges like diseases, famine, structural racism, gender oppression, and climate change. She's also a research professor at the Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts University in Massachusetts, US. Next, we have Maha Haidar-Maki. Hello and welcome.
Hi, Brendan.
Maha is director of the Mastercard Foundation Scholars Program at the American University of Beirut, one of the oldest modern institutions of higher education in the Arab world and in the global south. And the program supports students working with communities to tackle local challenges, such as COVID-19 awareness projects for refugees in Lebanon and campaigns against female genital mutilation in Africa. And next we have Mariam Mohudin. Welcome and good morning, I should say, as you're speaking to us from Toronto this time.
Good morning. Good now.
Yes. Mariam is founder and director of the Social Innovation Lab, Lahore, Pakistan, which hosts Pakistan's first social enterprise incubator. It partners with universities encouraging experiential learning and helping professors and students through engagement with the community to develop humanistic ideas for social interventions, drawing inspiration from local wisdom and practices and concepts such as regenerative design and commercialize them, ensuring sustainability. Okay, so we just want to have a quick look at our first poll results, and we can see that from that 50% of you are academics, 6% is university students, 25% are business or professional, and 17% other. So quite a wide spectrum and a lot of academics, which we're pleased to see. Now, we build this discussion as being set in the age of political division, where whole regions and groups of the population feel left behind, whether by globalization, by their governments or the institutions around them, including universities. But we know through our own reporting on University World News that there are many efforts by universities through civic engagement and development of social impact leaders to solve local and global challenges, and many examples of them becoming a leading force for positive change in their community and internationally. So the question is, how can we improve that work and encourage more universities to emulate it? So perhaps we should start by asking a second poll we're going to ask is if you work or study at a university, are you able to say, and just click the box if it is true, whether your university or higher education institution has social impact as part of its mission? So please go to the second poll and answer that question. And while you're doing that, what I want to ask our panel speakers, first of all, is, to frame this debate very quickly in one sentence each, could you just tell us what you think social impact means? What do we mean by social impact? What is it that we are trying to achieve? And I'm going to start with Hilligje.
Well, you asked for one question, I think, here for one sentence. So very quickly, I would say that social impact is the capacity of universities to move from expertise to practice, from design of generic solutions to their translation into local practical application, and certainly also uptake.
Thank you. Lorlene, what is your take on it?
Thank you so much for bringing us together. To be clear, this is a moment of crisis. I just want to acknowledge that we have lost more than 2 million people to the coronavirus, and that we are experiencing increased levels of depression and anxiety, and it's a stressful time for a lot of people. So in this moment, I believe that social impact is an urgent question and a call for action. And that is, what can we do now to contribute to the well-being of others?
Thank you. And Maha, let's hear your take.
So in one sentence, as promised, Brendan, social impact is the ethical engagement in matters related to the environment and society with the aim of improving living conditions now, in the future, and contributing to the development of humanity.
Thank you. And Mariam?
We're a little more cut and measure. So in our world, social impact is a measurable change in the lives of the beneficiaries of any intervention. And in the university world, that would mean how are university interventions positively impacting their communities?
Thank you. So a strong idea we have there of what it is. And the second question I'm going to ask our panelists is, should universities make social impact part of their mission, and how? And I'm sorry, we've already asked the poll. I was just about to ask you to do a poll, but you're already doing that poll, which is great. So we'll move straight to move smoothly and swiftly on. And so the question I'm going to ask our panelists is, should universities make social impact part of their mission, and how? And perhaps we could start with Hilligje. You lead a global network of universities. What is your view?
Well, yes, universities should definitely, or they already do make social impact part of their mission and also of their strategic development. And I think it actually answers to a certain extent the question that Lorlene was asking, what can we do to change? And universities are today at a turning point where they see that they can no longer be only these expertise development organizations and institutions, but they have to also look at how this expertise actually makes sense in society. And so they do that through all kinds of activities, but first and foremost by embedding it in their strategic plans, but then also translating it into very concrete examples. And I would like to give one. And it is the university, Siam University in Thailand, for instance, that is using university knowledge and innovation to support community during the pandemic. So what they did was to actually use their capacity to manufacture and distribute sanitizing gel, for instance, and alcoholic solutions to the people who travel on mass transit systems. And it may sound as simple, but it's not that simple, but it is very useful. And it is part of a dual mission of the university, both to educate, to do research, to develop something within the university, to bring it to society, and thus through this example to also educate people into better sanitation, taking care of each other, responding to a specific need. And there are many other examples that I will be able to use later also in the discussion.
Thank you, Hilligje. Lorlene, Talloires Network has a strong commitment to community engagement, but should all universities be committing to making a social impact? Lorlene, we can't hear you. Could you turn your mic on?
Sorry. Yes, they should make social impact a part of their mission for society's sake and for their own sake to remain relevant. And this question is really at the heart of who we are. And institutional leadership is a vital step. The Talloires Network of Engaged Universities is a growing coalition of more than 400 university presidents, vice chancellors, and rectors in 79 countries, each of whom have publicly committed to strengthening the civic roles of their institutions. And there are many ways forward in terms of getting the job done. The Talloires Network in particular, we support the incorporation of civic engagement activities into the research mission and into the teaching mission of universities, and of course also into the service mission. And there's a variety of approaches that we support. Some of those include community-based research and applied research, as well as service learning, experiential learning, volunteerism, but also importantly, other forms of civic engagement that have a social impact, such as policy making, political activism, social entrepreneurship, just to mention a few. We really strive to recognize and celebrate the diversity of ethical approaches to university civic engagement. And I'll provide just one example. I have many here, depending on the time we have together. But I've been really impressed by the way that our members have been able to pivot, when the pandemic took hold globally. And so one example would be Meridian Global University and the Access Care Foundation in Cameroon were initially providing testing kits for malaria and HIV, but they pivoted in March and they began to provide hygiene education and basic healthcare services for displaced people. Another really crisp example from another part of the world would be Universidad Veracruzana in Mexico. They joined forces with government agencies when the pandemic took hold, and they involved indigenous young people in a variety of food security projects because that was the pressing issue in their local communities. So there's a couple of examples.
Thank you, Lorlene. And I'm just wondering, one of the distorting factors, because it's not just about whether universities want to take on this kind of work, but there are pressures working against it, such as the ranking system, for instance, that actually encourages universities to focus on more traditional research activities beyond anything else. Do you think we need to change the context as well, and how do we do that?
Are you asking me specifically?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that was for another panelist. You know, the Talloires network approaches this notion of rankings in a very different way. We are really more interested in advancing a classification system that acknowledges community engagement and institutional reform in ways that give institutions an opportunity to reflect on their practices for the sake of improving those practices, not necessarily for the purpose of ranking a couple of slots higher against another university. But I would love to pause and hear what my colleagues have to say about rankings. I'm sure many of them are more well-versed than myself.
You're muted, Brandon.
Sorry, perhaps I just could have a quick word from Hilligje on ranking, as you deal with global network. Do you have a view on that? Is ranking doing enough to encourage social impact work, or is it actually working against it?
I think for a long time, yeah, this is a very important point. The IAU is indeed a global network. We're present in all parts of the world. We've been very pleased to work a long time also with the Talloires network, for instance, also on social impact issues and with many people around the world. And the members are some 600 among the 20,000 that we reach out to in general. And we see that the rankings have two or three different impacts actually on universities. In the beginning, it was really to see what makes a very high quality university. And I think that they tried to measure that. They didn't succeed. What they managed to show is why and on what financial basis or research metrics basis they could develop a kind of university that was actually competing with others. So what you said already previously is that the rankings is fostering a lot of competition and not necessarily what we need today, a more strong emphasis on cooperation, working together to address the challenges that we face. And thus the rankings and the rankers themselves, and there are quite a few out there, have come to luckily realize that step by step, because they also see that they're less popular, that there are other things out there, and that it's not only by competing between institutions that you will be able to serve the communities nor develop the countries in the way that they can develop. And all universities have their own specificity. They have their own role in their own locality, yet all connected to the global level. And thus, if the rankings are there to stay, and if they're used by some to also actually to move up their capacity to act or to transform and to improve their teaching and learning, some people in some parts of the world, the University of the West Indies, for instance, was welcoming the rankings and saying, this allowed me to push as a leader the people inside to improve on what they did and to show better what they could do. So why not? It's one positive side. But we also see that there are many other opportunities out there to go to what was just said, classification and better understanding of the impacts of universities on their localities. And rankings don't do that. They just measure numbers. They have tables of things that you can count, and that's fine. It serves one purpose, but it is far from enough if you want to improve the quality end of teaching, even the quality of research, and the quality of the impact of such research and usefulness for the society in the locality, but also at the global level. So rankings, we've been fighting for quite a while. Now we work with them to improve them.
Thank you. And Maha, perhaps you could tell us a bit about your view on rankings and the particular work that your university does, because you're in quite a different context in a country that has is in a different region and has a long history of conflict and is dealing with a number of refugees. And so one wonders how relevant the current ranking systems are to a university in such a different context. But also I want to hear about some of the interesting work that you're doing.
Thank you, Brandon. So, of course, rankings have always played a role in the recognition of the universities. And universities historically have been more recognized for the roles of research, teaching, and research. But mostly, I would argue that social impact, even if rankings and prominence of the universities is only seen or mostly seen through research and teaching, I would argue that social impact happens organically to various degrees, of course. It happens through research agendas and their impact on the advancement of science and technology. It also happens through the graduates who are impacted not only by the knowledge and skills, but also by the values and the culture of the universities. And they impact the world, in their turn. So I think the question here is how to give more salience and more importance, and how to blend between the three roles of the university, which are teaching, research, and social impact. And given, as you said, that we are a university in an area of the world that have witnessed conflict and many other devastating events over, the last decades, I'll try to give examples from AUB. I'll start with talking about the Center of Civic Engagement and Community Service, which started as a task force for reconstruction following the 2006 July war on Lebanon, and is now an established center that has gained international recognition. And then I'll give an example of a course, a service learning course, which is a collaboration between the School of Engineering and Public Health. So the Center of Civic Engagement focuses on building bridges between the university community, the stakeholders, the humanitarian agencies, policymakers, and community partners. Today, more than 10,000 Syrian refugees in Lebanon are direct beneficiaries of one of the center's initiatives, which is the Syria Relief Project. This initiative encompasses many projects: a college readiness program, a digital skills training program, a school psychosocial support program. And through each of these projects, AUB faculty have been engaged in action-based research that is contributing to a growing body of knowledge on issues related to refugees. Furthermore, they are also helping and supporting in designing solutions, educational curricula, other tools to contribute to the improvement of the condition of refugees. Now, such projects are also a chance for the students, and in particular, the scholars of the Mastercard Foundation at AUB, not only to engage in community volunteering, but also to witness firsthand and learn through, the proactive approach and the strategic approach of the center, how developing the human resources of refugees during a protracted crisis can contribute to the relief, reconstruction, and recovery of their own country upon their safe return. Now I move from talking about, like a project, a center, to a course, because it's we're talking about initiatives in the form of community projects, action-based research, but also more academic. So this is a service learning course, which is entitled Design of Engineering Solutions for Health Challenges and Crises. And it encourages participants to use engineering design to address humanitarian challenges, to bridge the gap between practitioners, engineers, NGOs, scientists, in order to generate health solutions for populations in protracted crisis. The fact, as you said, that the university and the particular location in Lebanon allows the students taking the course to benefit not only from interactive lectures, but field visits to humanitarian settings. And then, they work in teams, they conduct need assessment, they identify problems, ideate, design, and prototype solutions. So as universities, in my opinion, we attract students because of our ability to train them on solving real-world problems. So even if today's social impact is still missing from the official documents such as mission and vision, I think it's slowly but surely gaining prominence and becoming part of strategies and plans, and infiltrating to become integral to the ethos and the DNA of higher education institutions. So until the mission and the vision and the ranking criteria and the promotion criteria are revised, I think collaborations such as the Talloires network, the Mastercard Foundation Scholars Program will keep on playing a huge role in supporting the rise of social impact in higher education institutions.
Thank you, Maha. Very interesting examples there. And before we move on to Mariam, I just want to give you the result of the second poll, which is that, does your university or higher education institution have social impact as part of its mission? And wow, 75% say yes, and only 5% say no. So it does seem to be widespread. We have more than 500 people actually watching at the moment. So that gives you, quite a good poll. So that's quite an interesting finding. Excuse me. So Mariam, we turn to you, and it's interesting to hear about from Maha about how it can grow organically. I mean, doesn't it come down to whether universities should be putting more thought into why they are here, into what their higher purpose should be, and what is their potential to support communities as an anchor institution in your area?
So thank you, Brendan. And thank you all for actually piping in. I feel like there's so many points that were mentioned here that all kind of feed into my perspective on this. Yes, you're right. It absolutely should be part of their mission. Rankings play a role, but there's also, two different ways. And like Maha said, right, a lot of it is ground up. It's from the bottom. It's organic. And yet there's a very significant role that not only universities, but actually higher education commissions and policymakers have to play in this realm. So particularly in Pakistan, under the leadership of Sohail Naqvi, Higher Education Commission in 2015 actually said that universities as anchor institutions can't just focus on research and teaching, that they have to go beyond this and create stronger leaders, stronger communities, and which will all lead to stronger economies. And so in very fundamental ways, the idea was that universities need to rethink why they exist and what role they play in communities and societies at large. In Pakistan, one of the things we did at the Social Innovation Lab was push students, faculty, university leadership to learn from indigenous and local models, particularly indigenous wisdom traditions, which force us to think about education not only in terms of data and information that can be translated to knowledge, but actually to go a step beyond and consider wisdom as the final step in one's education. Wisdom, the idea that there's a higher purpose to why I am here on this planet. What is my role here in this universe? How am I supposed to interact with those around me? How am I supposed to serve those around me? And once you start asking these questions, a lot of these, the mission part and the milestones and the metrics become a lot clearer, because now you're working with the sense of, this is my vision. This is what I have to get to. And then you kind of trace back the steps. So one of the things that we saw in Pakistan happen as a result of the HEC's movement towards creating better leaders, better communities, and better economies was allowing more faculty, staff, and students to play a more active role in the communities around them. Through the Talloires network, of course, we at the Social Innovation Lab, in partnership with the Lahore University of Management Sciences, created a model in terms of a university social enterprise incubator that allows students and faculty to partner on some of the most pressing challenges they see around them in their communities and create business solutions to those challenges. Once we actually created this model, we partnered with a number of organizations, both in the education and policy space, but also in the international donor and aid agency spaces. So for instance, with the British Council, one of the key things we did was lobby the Higher Education Commission to look at whether business incubation centers, and particularly social enterprise incubation, could be one way in which universities could very effectively create social impact in their communities and make it part of their missions. And now, a few years later, you're actually seeing the HEC actually gives grants in Pakistan to different universities to set up incubators and business incubation programs at their venues. And so, like Maha said, yes, it comes from the bottom. It comes from students and faculty and people who see problems around them and try and solve them. But it also comes from the top. So it's more of a circle. And the idea is that we listen and we learn and we act on what we've listened to and learned from. And once we've done that, just pivot and start the circle again. That's been our experience in Pakistan.
Thank you, Mariam. Very interesting. So now I'd like to move on to our third question, which is how can universities best tackle social inequity and build social solidarity? And before we put this question to the panelists, we'd like to ask you, our audience, about some of the measures that your university or higher education institution is taking. So our third poll question, which you should again see below your chat window now, is can you tell me if at your university or institution, which of the following measures have had the most social impact? Which one has had the most social impact? Is it faculty rewarded or recognized for getting involved in civic engagement? Is it recognition or credit for students undergoing civic engagement or social enterprise work? Is it in work with communities, communities are treated as equal partners, helping shape the direction of projects? Is it having a social enterprise incubator that helps make projects sustainable? Is it that the institution uses social contracts to ensure that some jobs or supply orders go to local people and businesses? Or is it that there are pathways into higher education at the institution for students from disadvantaged families? So while you're filling that in on the right, we'll carry on with our questions to the panelists. So now I'm going to start again with Hilligje. You've been a strong advocate of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Do they provide a framework for universities to tackle social inequity?
Well, thank you for this question. Indeed, the IAU has been very much engaged with the Sustainable Development Goals and with the UN 2030 agenda, because we believe that not only do universities have a role to play, but they play a very strong role. They don't always name it SDGs, but they do work on many different aspects that are of key importance and have been identified as the global goals for us until 2030 and probably way beyond. So it is a framework that indeed allows universities to rethink and reimagine the knowledge project in itself, to also look at how to radically change how universities are organized, how they are dealing with the different issues that they are proposing when students enter a university, when staff comes to a university, or even how the leadership can engage with all the different stakeholders within. It is offering the opportunity to envisage a future with more transdisciplinarity, with more opportunities to connect the knowledge systems from around the world, because it requires for this gymnastics between the local and the global continuously. Is it on poverty issues, on security issues, on peace and justice, or life on land? All these issues will never be solved if we only look at it from one and only perspective. They resonate with the disciplines as we know them in universities, yet they require for us to think differently about an issue that we need to tackle. And so your question is, does this also address the issue of inequality or inequity, and does it build social solidarity? It does not per se from the outset, but it does in the end, because if we do not open up, if we do not ensure for new voices to come into the systems, we will not be able to address the challenges that we face. If we do not move away from competition and only the best and the brightest according to a set of criteria set already from pre-primary to secondary into tertiary, we will not be able to get to the knowledge project, the people who have something to say and who have the capacity to also help rethink how we did things. Because universities have had a strong role over time. They've done an enormous amount of good work, and they are the unique organization that has resisted time and is still there for centuries. So it has a place a role to play today, like it had centuries ago. But it's moving on, and it's moving on towards this more inclusiveness, equity, better participation, better connection. And that is actually also even the very vision and mission, the basis upon which the International Association of Universities was built 70 years ago. After Second World War, we decided that we would need a new contract between knowledge systems to bring in people from everywhere around the world, the 5 continents always, from different systems of higher education, because you have so many different models, and to ensure that there is a connect between them, there is a dialogue between, there is an opportunity to do something about the fragilities of our world that led to more wars than to peace. So the Sustainable Development Goals, I'm going in circles here and I'm getting back to them, yes, are a framework that initially was not even involving the higher education community. It took 5 years before even universities took it up fully, because they didn't see how to really engage with them. But today they do. And they are embedding the principles also as a whole of institution approach across the whole institution, across the sector and internationally, and building a different approach to how to create the kind of knowledge we need today for today and for tomorrow. So yes, less inequity, but we still have to be very vigilant, and we have to work on it together, because otherwise it will slip off the agenda fairly easily. You're muted again. Do you want me to give an example?
Sorry, I was just going to ask, sorry, my mistake. I'm busy telling you all to mute, and then here I am. Sorry about that. Yes, no, I was just going to ask, is there any sense of the extent to which the SDGs are being used as a framework by universities? Is that impossible to know, or is there, I mean, we get a sense on University World News that there's a lot more interest in the SDGs than there was in the Millennium Development Goals, for instance. So I'm just wondering, has there been any measurement of the extent to which they're being used by universities?
I think that and I will be very brief and then leave the others obviously also to complement on this, but there are many examples where you see that it really has been embedded in as a whole of institution approach to it. So you can give the University of Bergen in Norway example, where they really have SDGs as the driving force for transformation for the institution, and it translates in very creative projects around the different SDGs and engaging everyone from students to staff, from the technical support, from the canteen people, from the city around, and then back into at the country level in the region and globally. They work very closely with the University of the West Indies on water issues and on SDG 14, life below water, where you see that the connect between the two is really very strongly emphasizing on the need to work together to develop the kind of dynamics that will involve the many and transform both the university, and emphasize a lot the notion of students as being the citizens that take on specific roles in society. They're there for a few years in the university, so you have to be fast. So it starts right from year one. And all through the academic career, the students have the opportunity to get involved in courses, but also in community engagement initiatives, into developing projects that are problem-based or more research-based for the pure sake of research. And then through the dynamic of the global IU cluster on the SDGs, we then also connect across the globe. So it's not only Bergen with the University of the West Indies, it is back to Ghana. From Ghana, it will go to South Africa. Because the life below water, for instance, what is below water is the oceans. The oceans is something that we share around the world. So we have to work on that together. And that togetherness is transpiring throughout what universities are doing. And then it translates in the different layers, the teaching, the research, the community engagement, but also campus activities in a very broad range of opportunities.
Thank you. And Lorlene, I mean, one of the things Talloires network places great stress on, and it's something I'd like you to talk about, is the need that in whatever universities do on inequity and social solidarity, the important thing is that they need to work in partnership with communities. Perhaps you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll go back to the moment that we find ourselves in as we look at this question of social equity. You know, in June 2020, we had seen people all around the world move into the streets and demand racial justice and demand to bring an end to violence against Black people. And we also learned throughout 2020 that the coronavirus really disproportionately impacted communities of color with respect to their individual health and the economic stability of their communities. And so this question of social equity is fast becoming a more and more urgent issue that needs addressing. People are angry, they're sad, and importantly, is individual institutions, universities, but also I'd really like to expand the circle. I love the notion of a circle that Miriam raised. We're working from the bottom up in universities, we're working from the top down in universities, and there's philanthropic agencies and organizations like the Mastercard Foundation, the Open Society Foundations, Carnegie Corporation. It's a very long list. I don't have time for them all today. I wish I could give them a shout out. But they are fundamental partners in this collective cause and this collective effort. And during this time, when people were using their bodies quite literally to raise issues of racial inequity, many of these philanthropic organizations reaffirmed their commitment to promoting human rights, and they began speaking out on issues of civic importance and really feeding into the global network of engaged universities in very important ways. And just a specific example of that would be the recent launch of the Open Society University Network, with whom we've partnered to launch a program called COVADE, which stands for, I hope I get this right, Communities of Virtual Alliance and Interdependence. And we launched that during the pandemic, and it has many components. One is a webinar series to bring people together so that we could learn in real time from one another how to strategically respond to the pandemic in partnership with local communities. And importantly, it had a significant cash prize for undergraduate and graduate students who were suddenly, had, their worlds turned upside down. They were forced to leave campus. They were locked down wherever they could go. They had all sorts of issues, right? So we wanted to reach out to those students and create a community for those students. And we specifically wanted to support students who were able to pivot and really find a way to contribute to the community despite all of the challenges. So one just specific example of that to highlight what I'm getting at here is one award winner is a graduate student at Rutgers University in the United States. He's a Black male who used to work as a police officer. And after the death of George Floyd, in his own words, he felt an overwhelming duty and social responsibility to change the system from within. And so he began working in collaboration with law enforcement officers and community leaders, and he co-founded a project that's really focused on repairing the relationship between communities and law enforcement. So there's really, it's been a very daunting year for all of us, but at the same time, I am constantly invigorated by the ways in which our members are taking action and the ways that they're providing opportunity and the ways that they're offering hope.
Thank you, Lorlene. Very interesting, and we have a very lively chat and people showing their appreciation in the chat. It's going on with people from all over the world, which is great to see. Now I'd just like to, before we move on to Maha, I'd just like to look at the results of the last poll, which was the question of, at your university, which of the following measures have had the most social impact? And looking down, you can see that 30% chose treating communities as equal partners had the most social impact, and that after that was narrowly faculty recognition for the work they're doing, followed by, with that, because the treating as communities as equal partners was by 30% of people, 21% picked faculty recognition, and 18%, it keeps changing all the time because people are still voting, 18% chose higher education pathways for disadvantaged families. Again, very interesting. So there's a strong recognition of the importance of working with communities and treating them as equals. So if you're not already doing that, perhaps you should think hard about that. And now let's move to Maha. Could you tell us more about how your university, AUB, tackles inequity and helps students tackle inequity in particular?
Yeah. Thank you, Brandon. So I'll try to answer this question through the story of the Mastercard Foundation Scholars Program at AUB. So this program offers scholarships to young students from countries in Africa, as well as to Lebanese students and refugees in Lebanon. As an institution, we believe that through this program, we are addressing equity issues because we are ensuring access to the university, not only for the economic elite and those who are advantaged and more privileged. So we're, opening the door and having a voice for everyone within. However, it's very important that we also recognize the hidden barriers that are beyond access. Some of these barriers relate to the student, and others relate to the culture and the system within the institution. So as such, in addition to our work through this program to empower scholars, we need to be humble as an institution and look inside, examine our own system. Do we have a supportive environment for our students? As we support diversity and inclusion on campus, what are the things that we need to address at the level of our own system to make sure that our students are protected and to make sure that the environment is welcoming? Another important aspect, I believe, relates to our reaction when our students recognize inequity around them. So I'll give an example of a group of students who were doing community volunteering with the Migrant Domestic Workers Center in Lebanon. And through these volunteering hours, they got exposed to the difficult conditions and unfair treatment endured by these migrant domestic workers. So this led them to focus their community work while in the university on this issue and receive the support, the mentorship needed to implement community-based projects with the migrant domestic workers community. So I think to go back, and it speaks to the points that Hilligje and Lorlene were saying, if we fail to provide an example of an inclusive environment within, it's very difficult for us to model and preach equity and social solidarity to our students, let alone to the communities around us. So as higher education institution, we need to support our students as they navigate our system, provides a safe environment, a welcoming environment that allows them to flourish. And we should also provide them with guidance and support when they choose to address inequity issues that they face around them.
Thank you, Marianne. And sorry, Maha, Mariam, could you tell us about the usefulness of regenerative design and how you think this approach of listening and learning from the community that you promote through your innovation lab helps improve the effectiveness of efforts to tackle inequity and build solidarity?
It's very interesting because what the poll says is essentially what our work has reflected as well, that the first step is always to essentially look as the community as your equals and your partners in this work. And so one of the things we found while working with the Lahore University of Management Sciences was that often, you know, the talk is all about, okay, let's leave the ivory tower. Let's go out to the community, that, you know, let's do all this work, right? And it's great. And it worked really well in our particular example, because we had these wonderful students who would go out, work with communities and make tremendous impact. And yet, you know, it was very one-sided. There was always a barrier when it came to the community coming inside, right? And so one of the things we did with the university was to actually open those gates and make this a two-way exchange. And this sometimes meant that the guy who usually sits outside the university drives a rickshaw around the city, taking students from one end to the other and barely meeting minimum wage requirements. That guy can now come inside the university and be part of our social enterprise incubator and learn the ABCs of how to make a business, how to go about doing human-centered design, how to create a prototype. And it's not just us. I mean, as part of this program, the Youth Economic Participation Initiative, which was supported by the Mastercard Foundation and Talloires network, it was a number of partner universities, primarily I can think of the University of Cape Town in South Africa, who were doing a similar project where they were allowing dropouts to come in at the Graduate School of Business alongside these fancy MBAs and learn how to make businesses. And so the first step, I think the poll has it spot on. We need to treat our community as equals. We need to treat them as partners, and we need to make this a two-way street. The second thing that really worked was, and that I feel like particularly here in Canada, they get so well, is learning from First Nation and Indigenous communities around the importance of vision and long-term vision. So one of our partners in the British Columbia region actually told us about how First Nations there, when they design a project or they design an intervention, they think 7 generations ahead when they think about its impact. And so if we were, as universities, to think about social inequity 7 generations before us and 7 generations ahead, something will fundamentally change in the way we are designing our interventions. And that in itself will give you the building blocks of social solidarity. It will not need to be forced. You know, like Maha said, like I keep going back to Maha's point about, you know, social impact becoming organic and how a culture that you emulate inside is what will allow that to manifest outside. And so that starts with looking inwards and having the right vision. And the third bit, which is, you know, the circular design aspect, which we very much embody in our incubator, is the idea of listening and learning as the primary way of doing social inequity work and social solidarity work. That unless you step into the shoes, unless you empathize, unless you use that empathy, turn it into compassion for the community, and then create interventions, co-interventions. You can't just be like, hey, I'm an expert. I know this better than you do. Here's a, you know, cut paste solution from XYZ place, and I'm going to do this here and it's going to work. That doesn't happen. You have to sit and talk with the people you're claiming you're serving, and understand the fact that it's not like you're some savior. They are in that role as much serving you because they are making you better human beings. This service is not one way, it's 2 ways. Their allowance, the space they are giving you to co-create these interventions with them actually leads you to yourself, leads you to your purpose. And so the minute we get off our high horse and treat each other as equals and partners, Ubuntu, I am because you are, The minute this is the approach we start taking, social solidarity is no longer a question. One of the things, I'll give you a very quick example. I know I'm running completely over right now, but one of our key sort of interventions or pedagogy approaches in teaching social entrepreneurship was actually taking our students to a vegetable garden at the very back of the campus at LUMS. And people used to be like, what is this? How can you teach students business skills through vegetable farming? But vegetable farming is a fantastic example of systems change and systems thinking and the systems approach. And one of the things that would happen was we would flip the equation completely, right? Because here were these vegetable gardeners who were high school dropouts who had been doing this work for 40 years on end. And suddenly these were the people teaching these students, not PhD professors from high-end universities publishing like 7 papers a year. No. Suddenly we're flipping that equation and saying knowledge and wisdom can come from all kinds of places. One of the things these vegetable farmers would tell the kids would be, look, I put this seed here. I brought in this natural fertilizer. I did my hydroponics. I did everything. I watered this. But unless there's good climate, unless the sun shines, unless there's no flooding or rain, unless those conditions come from the outside, come from the universe, come from God even, I can't do anything. I play my part, and then the universe plays its role, and together we create something. And giving that knowledge and giving that wisdom, giving that foresight to the students completely changed the way they went about doing their social businesses and social enterprises. And if this is the kind of, regenerative systems approach we take, social solidarity is just one of the amazing things that will result.
Thank you, Mariam. Great insights there. So now, before we move to the last, we're running out of time, so we're going to carry on for another 20 minutes or so. But before we move to the last question to the panelists, we would like to ask you, our audience, what do you think on our final poll question, which you should see again below your chat window. And this is, what do you think is the most important way that universities can improve their social impact? Is it by academics and staff persuading the university leadership to address social impact strategically? Is it by changing policy and practice on access and achievement for disadvantaged students? Is it by civic engagement projects with communities around access or social enterprise? Is it by educating students to become young change leaders, or all of the above? And you can choose one answer. And now we're going on to our final question, which is, how can universities encourage students to become agents of transformative change? And we're going to begin with a short video, which is from the Mastercard Foundation project in Lebanon with Maha, and certainly shows that there's a huge amount of enthusiasm that can be tapped among students.
We're here today at an ideation session, which is basically one large brainstorming exercise that aims to inspire and empower our youth and tomorrow's generation to come up with solutions to problems facing our world today.
I am so excited so far. It's been really, really great, and I can't wait for the competition to begin.
I also talked about how did we start, our modest beginnings, the things that we have won, the practices that we use to keep us grounded and to make sure that we achieve good results in a very short and a very small period of time.
We believe in the power of our scholars, we believe in their ideas, we believe in their ability to change the world, and we're here to escort them through the process, provide them with the tools they need to make this world a better place.
A heartwarming video. Maha, please tell us about some of the work that the students at AUB are doing to help communities and how they are becoming agents of change.
Hi, thank you, Brandon. So So I'll try to answer, and focus on 2 projects first. So, and then think together what have been, the success factors behind this project, what has supported these students. So the first one is a foundation called Solas for Somaliland Girl Foundation, which was co-founded by 3 scholars, Uba, Kauthar, and Claudette. And their aim is to end female genital mutilation in Somaliland. For Solas, it all started through a discussion to find an idea for a social venture challenge, which is an opportunity offered by the foundation to earn a fellowship that provides, mentorship and seed funding for winning ideas. And since then, they've been active, well-established, and providing awareness sessions in schools and universities across Somaliland in the hope of reaching their goal of having no girl born with the fate of suffering the physical and emotional trauma of FGM. Another project is called Hey, How Are You? This is an initiative soon to become a startup that is being supported by the Social Entrepreneurship Fund initiated 2 years ago by the Mastercard Foundation. So Hey is co-founded by 4 scholars, Fatima, Noor, Zainab, and Sarah, and aims to promote mental health and well-being among university students, youth in general, in fact, through advocacy, education, as well as group therapy sessions. So they want to eliminate taboos around mental health and make mental health support more accessible through group therapy sessions to reduce the cost of therapies. Today they have more than, they've started less than a year ago, I guess. And today they have not actually started with the idea. And today they have more than 2,800 followers on social media and have been very active, especially since the outbreak of the pandemic, providing webinars and creating awareness messages. There are, of course, many other projects and initiatives we can mention, but I chose to talk about those 2 particularly because the scholars had the courage to tackle sensitive issues in both cases. If we ask about what have supported the scholars in both cases, I can think of several things, but first the opportunity, of course. So there was an opportunity that presented itself, whether the Social Venture Challenge or, the Social Entrepreneurship Fund, which provides mentorship, but also seed funding. There's also the institutional setup at the university. So the rich exposures that the students have through the Center of Civic Engagement and other entities on campus, the expertise on entrepreneurship training that's provided by the Center of Research and Innovation, and many others. Third, I think there's also the framework for transformative leadership that we have put for our scholars. And this framework is a continuum of capacity building workshops, exposure visits, volunteering opportunities, as well as mentorship and support in the implementation of community-based projects. But I think there's also one particularly important issue, which is the fact that through the Scholars Program, we are allowed to admit students in cohorts and work on community building within AUB as well as across the network of institutions. And I think, from my experience with our own scholars, I think that this have had a particular effect on having the scholars feel empowered by this network of like-minded young leaders. This is what I thought about in general. These are definitely important factors, but there are surely many other factors as well. I find it difficult to pinpoint one magic formula for building transformative leaders, but there are events that confirm to you that you are on the right track. And here I would like to mention the amazing work that our scholars have been doing during the pandemic, supporting their communities, building, raising awareness, as well as how scholars from all nationalities have volunteered in the relief efforts after the Beirut blast in August. I'm sure you've all heard about it. And this was not because of a competition, nor a program requirement. It was purely self-driven. And this, to me, proves that you are among ethical leaders, eager to change the world for the better. And it truly inspires hope for me, and I hope, to all the others around me.
Thank you, Maha. Certainly inspirational. Mariam, your social enterprise incubator has a way of bringing structure and realism to student ambitions. and to help their community. Could you tell us a bit about how you did that with the RISC project, for instance, which has effectively created a business model for fighting hunger in the city of Lahore and beyond that, as we have reported?
So RISC actually now is going national. They recently started 2 of their food banks in Islamabad and Karachi. But I'll give you a little bit of context. So RISC started with 3 young students who came to us in 2015. One of them had their mom making meals every weekend for the community and just distributing for them for free. So every morning she would wake up, she'd be cooking the whole day, and their garden and car garage, their doors would be wide open, and hundreds of people would come in and flock together and eat together with their family. They saw their mom do this and wanted to continue the work, but they were afraid that they wouldn't have time. We were also concerned that, you know, in these charity models where you have this one enigmatic figure, the minute that figure, you know, leaves the picture, these models tend to collapse. And so one of the things we talked about with these 3 really brilliant, bright-eyed young boys was the fact that there needs to be something sustainable about this intervention, and that this sustainability can actually come from a business model that allows them to carry on this work, not just as a side activity on the weekend, but something they do every day in their lives as a business, as a career. We were lucky to see them completely latch onto that idea, 100% go after it, and find really interesting ways of making this a sustainable model. So what RISC ended up doing was collecting excess food. So millions of tons of food are wasted around the world every single day. The RISC team partnered with restaurants and marriage halls and communities in Lahore to gather this excess food. They were paid for picking up this excess food. They partnered with a nutritionist to make sure that the food they pick up is edible and safe to consume. And then they went to low-income communities where they repackaged the food into clean containers and essentially started distributing that food for free initially. They later found out, so one of our mentors told them, hey, you know, that's great, but where's the dignity in that? And where's the sustainability in that? So when you actually give this food for free, you're telling people they can't do it for themselves, right? That you're the ones they have to rely on. But what if, you know, this was a very small token price, and yet when people were able to pay that token price, they had this sense of achievement. They had this sense of dignity that, look, whatever I'm earning, even if it's very small, this allows me to feed my family every day. And so the second revenue stream that ended up coming for RISC was 10 cents every meal. Over time, RISC ended up developing food banks where on each food bank, they actually had an extra room where they would encourage and allow partners to come and do their programming. Some of these partners were microfinance institutions that would allow small business loans to the community members. Some of these partners were healthcare nonprofits that would come and do health screenings for this community for free. Some of these partners were vocational training institutions who would come and upskill the people of the community. And so essentially, not only were they making sure that the community was food secure, they were pulling the community out of poverty across the SDGs. And this model is now something that RISC is replicating across Pakistan. And they're in conversation with the Global Food Bank Network. They're in conversation with Cargill, which is one of the largest food nonprofits in the world. And they're figuring out how to get this model transposed and these learnings shared with the rest of the Global Food Bank Network. And so it's an incredible example of how students can become agents of transformative change. During COVID-19, they also partnered with the Pakistan government and actually ensured that rations were distributed all the way from the very top of the mountains in Pakistan, all the way down to Karachi on the beach. And so they had a national scale serving over 220 million people in Pakistan and ensuring that they had access to food and were food secure during the COVID crisis, particularly during the lockdowns.
But isn't the key thing also that the way the incubator helped them to understand why they had to have a business model as opposed to simply wanting to do good?
Absolutely. And so the whole idea was around ensuring that the risk team, but not just the risk team, everyone who came, all students who came to our incubator, the key idea was, look, making money and doing good do not have to be mutually exclusive. You do not have to work at a high-end, for-profit, global corporate and earn tons of money and then use that to do good maybe in the future, or do charity on the weekends. No, it is social enterprise actually allows you to have a career in doing good, in doing community change, in doing work that gives you meaning in life every day, and that you can make money while doing this work. It ends up being a very equitable way of earning and giving back. So one of the things that we taught was actually Small is Beautiful by Edward Schumacher. One of the models we kind of used from that book was that when you earn, you need to make sure that the person who's at the lowest rung of employment in your company is earning no less than, you are earning no more than 8 times what they're earning. And so exorbitant CEO salaries go out of the way. Second thing, when you have profits, at least 50% of those profits need to go back to the community. And that's the basic of the social enterprise model, that unless you're giving at least 50% of what you're earning back, then you're not a social enterprise. And so in so many ways, we were ensuring that these students look at both making money, but also doing so in an equitable way while creating impact in their communities. And that was one of the key parts of the business modeling exercise of the incubator. Of course, the other sectors kind of focused on their soft skills, their personalities, making them into better human beings, or well, not even making them, like they were excellent human beings to begin with, just helping them find those parts of themselves, helping illuminate those aspects of their personalities is the other bit that the incubator was working on alongside the business skills.
Thank you, Mariam. And now we're just going to look at the poll results of our last poll before moving on. And as we can see, well, a very clear result there that people think, well, as you might think that the most important way that universities can improve their social impact is taking all of the above measures. 70% said that. And if we were going for individual measures, 10% said was by academics and staff persuading the university leadership to address social impact. And the next was 9% saying by educating students to become young change leaders. And after that, 7% saying by civic engagement projects. So quite a close vote on what the individual measures would be that would be most effective, most important, sorry. Okay, so we're running out of time, so I'm going to go straight to Lorlene and ask Lorlene if briefly, if you could say, we talk about students becoming agents of change, but is there a danger in using that expression that we're thinking that the students have the answers when in fact they should be developed with the community? Agents of change kind of feels like you're coming in and changing as opposed to helping other people change.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And though there's tremendous variation with regard to the different types of approaches that we support and encourage, that is a fundamental principle in the way that we think about the work, that we're working with, really hand in hand with communities, that it's not working for or giving something to communities. And I think that it's an especially important point during this intense period of uncertainty, where we've witnessed tremendous innovation, really adaptability, not only on the part of students, but of course, on the part of communities. And so students, and communities are learning hand in hand, and students, it's important that they learn from one another, that they're not, organizing an effort in their mind, implementing it and running off and taking credit for it, but that there really are some essential opportunities for students that are doing this work around the world to engage with one another. And so one of the things that we've done in partnership with the Mastercard Foundation, and Miriam knows a lot about this, she was part of it, but we also do with Open Society Foundations, is that anytime we dream up in partnership with communities around the world the kinds of programs that they feel are important in the moment, that we do the work, but we also provide and structure a forum, an international community of practice. So there's a series of meetings and conversations where people doing work in different places can learn from one another. And those conversations include students, faculty, university presidents, funding partners, and also community partners. So it's essential to get a mixture of voices into the conversation so that we can continue to improve the kind of work that we're doing. And I would just add to that you know, this notion of you know, students becoming agents of transformative change and how we might incorporate that or how we might encourage it. This is what young people want. They, you know, we've had a front row seat to witnessing this just enormous energy coming forward, a lot of ideas. And so whatever we can do to provide those opportunities, help to structure them and support them. We don't need to bring the energy. There's more than enough energy happening. I'll just highlight one or two very quick examples just to tether what I'm saying to the ground in a meaningful way for people who like stories. Catherine is an undergraduate student at Strathmore University in Kenya, and she had founded an initiative that educates girls around menstrual health and hygiene issues, and that provides hygiene products for girls. And during the pandemic, her project entirely shifted, and she partnered with the families of those girls, and they worked together to figure out how to make hand sanitizer. And then they, you know, had these different important discussions about COVID-19 prevention. Another example that I love, and then I'll stop, is because I have a lot. Vera, who's an undergraduate student at the University of Cork, she started an organization to support women and children who are seeking asylum in Ireland. And all of their programs and events were canceled when the pandemic arose. And so Vera worked together with women who were seeking asylum, and together they decided to make, you know, by hand, they purchased sewing machines, they raised the money, purchased the sewing machines, and they made thousands of masks in short order and then distributed them to communities who were not having access to masks at the very beginning of the pandemic. And one of the things that's so important about that initiative, not to mention the fact that it probably saved lives, is that it really began to change the attitudes and behaviors of people in terms of the way that they thought about asylum seekers and the way that they approached asylum seekers. So these efforts have ripple effects and just tremendous impact in so many ways.
Thank you, Lorlene. And Hilligje, you can have the last word, but the schemes we have talked about, the scholarship schemes, social enterprise, incubators, community engagement projects, they're all very positive, but do they only reach a small number of students, or can they be part of every student's higher education experience? How do we achieve that?
That's a very good question. I think your tree, the symbol for this very webinar, is a very beautiful one. All these hens on deck or on the tree and being the leaves of the futures. I think it actually really very well symbolizes this idea that all of the above in Nepal was important and can be brought to the university indeed as an opportunity to actually engage. I would like to maybe refer to a project that we've initiated with a group group of organizations around the world, the Anchors Institution Task Force, the Association for the Study of Higher Education in the US, UNISA, the University of South Africa, the University of Pennsylvania's Netter Center for Community Engagement, the International Consortium for Higher Education, Civic Responsibility, Democracy, the Council of Europe, the International Association of Universities, reaching out to 20,000 universities. We have developed a new project around the local mission of the university. So all the examples that have been given today are absolutely fantastic for me, because we have a meeting tomorrow, and I will be able to reflect on this and give this beautiful work also to the group to share it and to see how we can actually link that up and make it into something that would allow for many, many more students to take part in this. But there are beautiful examples, and I will give 3 very quick ones where, for instance, we can learn very much from Costa Rica, where each student engaging in the university has to give back 800 hours of volunteer time to society, which is amazing. And it really allows to understand how you anchor your own being into the society in which you live. And it has a dual effect. It also has the effect for the community to better appreciate the work of universities and to maybe better understand it, because it then also orchestrates a dual way and a coming of the community within the institution, and thus generating the kind of dialogue that will benefit the many, and maybe then break down the barriers of those distances between what is considered an institution that you don't go to when you don't know what it is. But then through these connections, it does. Another example that I would want to just highlight here is the work of SOS, that is an organization. SOS is a nice acronym for Student Offices for Sustainability that are popping up everywhere around the world, really giving the agency to students to become these transformative citizens that can help change the things from within the institution, but also applying it in their own life. I think we all said it, you have to lead by example. And thus, if these students already become these change agents in their student life, they then also will translate that in their homes, in their families, etc., etc. So, and there are obviously many very beautiful examples that we could give here. We don't have time. There's one other one that I like also, is to better recognize the research that students are undertaking. And there is one example that I liked a lot in the past. Also, it's dating a little, but still, it still has many implications today. It is this student, a woman student in Rwanda, who decided to look at the impact of plastic bags on the country and how detrimental it was. And you have that in many countries in Africa, where you have these images of trees that are all decorated with these floating plastic bags. And she decided to analyze the impact of a transformation of the society if you would ban plastic bags from the country. So would it generate different kinds of work? Would it generate the opportunity to develop new mechanisms around paper bags? Or would it generate also a different kind of approach to the environment? Would it generate health issues? And it worked. And the government decided to take the outputs and the results of the survey and to ban plastic from Rwanda. And that's still the case today. You get into the country, you have to leave your plastic bags at the border. And it has transformed the society for the better. And it is through the recognition of the quality of the work at the research and the research contribution of students, even before they public in Scopus or recognized wherever, that it has a value that can be upscaled to the point where other students will be capacitated or will be compelled to also contribute the kind of research that is needed to address our global challenges with local resonance. So yes, I believe that all the students could benefit from this. It's kind of talking back to what was said earlier as well, this human-centered approach to things, to bring it back to your own realities and understand the connect, and thus by being more centered also on what you represent as a citizen in your community as a student and in your community as a citizen, you can share with others, and we can improve the opportunities for many more to benefit from this. So I wanted to say also that I learned a lot from all the contributions made, and I made plenty of notes here, and I will come back to that as well. And I'd like to thank you, Brendan, for this opportunity, also for me as a panelist, to learn a lot and take this to the next level.
Thank you, Hilligje, and appreciate your remarks. And we are going to have to wrap up very shortly, not least because my daughter has come home from school, who's creating a lot of background noise. But I'm sorry about that. But in concluding, I'm sorry that to all our wonderful audience who are based all around the world, it's been interesting to see your chat. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer any questions directly on those, but I hope you have enjoyed the rich conversation we've had from our panelists. I think my concluding remarks would be that it's clear that there's common agreement on the importance of getting universities to think strategically about this issue, make it part of their mission, but actually make sure you act strategically, not just have it in your mission written down, but actually doing something about it. But there are many ways to improve social impact, from using the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework, to providing recognition and reward to students and staff, to providing a university incubator support to make social enterprises sustainable and scalable. But the key to it all, we're learning very clearly, is understanding the importance of working with the communities, as Lorlene has stressed, listening to them, in fact, as you've all stressed, learning from them, understanding their needs, and working together to find solutions. So this brings to an end our discussion, and I'd like to thank all our speakers. I think it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience has too. And so thank you, Hilligje, Lorlene, Maha and Mariam, very much appreciated. And if anybody would like to read our articles on social impact and civil engagement, you can find them on our Transformative Leadership section on our website, and in our Transformative Leadership Hub, which is you can clearly see on the topic bar. But also, if you like what you heard today, please sign up to our email newsletters to hear about future sessions. You can do that via the form at the end of any article you read on the website, and that way you'll receive University World News every week. And so thank you everybody for taking part. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and we look forward to having a next webinar. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but we will let you all know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Take care. Stay safe.
Yes, stay safe.
You too.
Most important.
Definitely.
Goodbye.
Say hi to your daughter.
She'll be saying hi to you if we carry on.
Very good.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.